Hey everybody, just wanted to check in. I'm doing a video interview with YouTuber Ashley Collins. Where this is pretty much a mostly no scripted interview. I'm still having some challenges with my streaming, or else I would have live streamed this with the Q&A. If you like this video and you want to see some kind of follow up, or you have questions for either Ashley or myself, where you want us to do a follow up collaboration video or discussion, feel free to put those questions, comments in the comment section below this video once it gets uploaded. Also, this video is going to be uploaded to both my channel as well as Ashley Collins' channel, which will have links in the description. So Ashley will primarily be interviewing me, but I'm going to be doing some of the post-production just because she primarily does her filming on the go from her phone. So Ashley, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Ashley Collins, and my YouTube channel is The Breakup Diaries.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about your channel.
Okay, so I guess a little bit of origin story. I went through a really bad breakup, and I'm an artist. So they usually say, use your broken art and turn it into art. Use your broken heart and turn it into art. And I was very ashamed. I was really embarrassed. I didn't know what to do, so I picked up my phone and I recorded myself. And it became more of like a therapeutic thing. It became a habit of every morning I would just record myself. How are you doing today, Ashley? And then I thought to myself, why don't I just put it on YouTube one day? Because I'm having like no space on my phone. I need to upload these photos, these videos somewhere. And I did that, and it turns out my story resonated with a few people. And I was like, hey, what if I like start doing this once a week? And people were looking forward to it once a week. And then I was like, why don't I just do this every day? And yeah, it's turned out to be a very rewarding experience for me and for some of the people whose lives I've touched as well. I feel like I kind of rambled there a little bit. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I mean, obviously, this is unscripted and live, or at least live for you and me anyway. So
Yeah.
not a problem at all. Now, you did have some questions for me. So go ahead and jump
Yeah.
into your questions and we'll kind of switch it up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure you were already thinking of an intro, but I just want to get just like your origin story as well, your bit of your background.
Okay. Without being overly verbose, I was raised in foster care 15 of 18 years. Um, and when I was 18, 19 years old, I knew everything because that's what 18 and 19-year-olds do. They know everything. And I thought I was going to get married, which I did. I got married just after I was 19. And that marriage did not work out. There were two children from that marriage. And basically we ended up separating. We were separated for a year and we ended up getting divorced. um, I ended up getting custody of both of those kids, and there was a huge post-divorce fight associated with that. And for the viewers on your channel who may not know, and even for those that may not know my kind of origin story, there's a 90-minute video called DDJ's Inferno, which is the original interview I did where I told my story on the Turd Flinging Monkey show in late April of 2017, where I was a guest on his weekly Saturday show, um, which kind of got me started in the whole YouTube thing. And as a bit of a tangent, so he has that video in 6 parts. If you want to watch each of those 6 parts, they're about 10-15 minutes long. The entire video is 90 minutes long. I have the whole video posted up in my channel. And then when I was doing my live show, I called that DDJ's Inferno because it was kind of a Q&A conversation sort of thing. Wasn't as combative as some of the interviews that you might see on YouTube, but we do discuss some controversial subjects. But now that tangent's out of the way, I ended up getting married a second time 5 years later because apparently I had to make the same mistake twice just to confirm that it was truly a mistake. We were together 21 years. We were married about 17. That marriage self-destructed, and we had 2 children from that marriage. Um, and that marriage was it when it died, I ended up getting custody of those kids as well. Um, that divorce was finalized in 2015, but we were separated from late 2014. Um, one of the things that kind of brought me to the second marriage and even the divorce was that when I was fighting the post-divorce action from my first marriage, and while I was with women whom I would later marry, I was part of the men's rights movement, and I had seen and had met a lot of fathers who had been divorce raped in the family courts as a part of their divorce actions or as a part of a paternity action. I had heard horrible stories, and if you listen to the video DDJ's Inferno, you might think, "Oh my God, this is the worst story I've ever heard." One of the things that I found was that even though my story was probably one of the worst stories I've ever heard, there were many stories that were tales of horror, where these fathers and children suffered as a direct result of not just the bad behavior of the mother, but really the bad behavior of the family court itself. And one of the things I learned very quickly was that the family court was saturated with man-hating feminists, and it really frustrated me. And that, again, that was part of my motivation to be part of the men's rights movement, was to bring equity back to the family courts and to bring equity back there. Now, in the process of fighting for my children, I ended up becoming a family law paralegal. So I learned the laws, I learned the case law, I learned the court rules, I learned, all the ways to fight, and I learned the legal culture. And what I found was that we already had laws on the books to protect fathers. Nobody gave a shit about them. And that was a big challenge for me, because that was kind of like a red pill moment for me, where you see the truth for what it really is, and you're like, this is horrible. The judges don't care. The attorneys don't care. The family court parenting investigators, they don't care. CPS doesn't care. The police don't care. And you get to this point where you just get frustrated. So probably about 2012, 2013, I discovered kind of the red pill theory, which you can look up on the internet if you want to kind of get an idea what that is. I discovered the manosphere. And I moved away from the MRA movement because I found that a lot of MRA organizations and events were mischaracterized as being misogynistic, as being woman hating, as being sexist. When in the reality that sure there were people, and some of them were prominent voices within the MRA movement, were very misogynistic and very sexist, but that wasn't the entire movement. And even though some of these people may have been voices, they didn't represent the majority of men that were being raked over the coals and having their lives destroyed. So eventually I discovered the MGTOW movement, which is men going their own way. It's an acronym, MGTOW. And that resonated with me. And as I thought about it, and as as my second marriage started to deteriorate, I realized that this was really the path that most closely resembled the morals and value judgments and things that I was dealing with. But most importantly, the MGTOW movement, even though it's an organic movement and there is a MGTOW community, it's not collectivist in nature. It's highly individualistic. And so when it came to this idea of basically how to express yourself, all the MGTOW teachings, and I'm not talking about the guys, the red pill ragers who are like hate all women, or or even the incels, or the TFLers. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the actual people who are original MGTOWs. The MGTOW 1.0 or MGTOW 2.0, like Stardust and Turd Flinging Monkey, who's been around a long time, or Barbar, Sandman. All the guys, the foundational guys who created and really, in my opinion, form the backbone of MGTOW teachings. These people really resonated with me with the way they're doing things. And now, even today, you look at people like Sunrise Hoodie, who takes MGTOW from a religious perspective, or you look at Human from Australia, who he really takes things from a highly philosophical bent. These are content creators that are sharing the core, in my opinion, the core of the philosophy. Now, the other nice thing about MGTOW is because it's individualistic. Opinions are like assholes, and everybody has one. So, that's my opinion. Other people may have a difference of opinion, and they're entitled to have that. But MGTOW is definitely not collectivist, as a lot of people try to mischaracterize it. So I kind of as far as like by way of background, um, that's kind of where I came from. I ended up being a family law paralegal for just over 10 years, and between 10 and 12 years. And I say 10 and 12 years because there was a 2 year period where I kind of did it part time, as kind of a secondary thing, whereas most of that other 10 years, it was kind of a primary thing for me. What I do now, last year, I published my first book. It was called The Feminist Lie. It was never about equality. On Amazon. It's also on the Apple Store. It's on Barnes and Noble as an ebook, but on Amazon, it's also you can get it as a paperback. And I'm very slowly working on an audiobook for it. So, but it's my first book. I thought I was just going to be like the old guy screaming from my digital porch to tell people to get off my lawn. Um, I really didn't expect anything to come of it. The first 2 weeks it was out, it was a bestseller on 3 bestseller lists in Amazon. Um, it's almost been a year. It's going to be a year here in about a week. Um, and it's been in the top 10, top 20, and definitely in the top 100 for the majority of the time that it's been out. Um, I'm really surprised by the amount of love that I've gotten for the book. I've had people come to me and tell me, "Oh my gosh, DDJ, you have been a huge influence on my life." I've had people use my book for source material for college papers. I've had high school kids contact me and say they've used it for book reports because it's extremely well sourced. And that's not arrogance, just as an FYI. If you look at the reviews on the book, um, and Amazon, I think, rates it over 4 or 4.5. None of the reviews ever question the source of the material that I provide. Not a single one of my facts has been credibly challenged in by any of the reviewers, at least that I've seen so far. So I wrote a book. I told my story on the TFM show. I eventually became the co-host of the Turd Flinging Monkey show on Saturday evenings, 7 p.m. Pacific time. #show alert. And the TFM 420 News Roundtable show at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Turd Flinging Monkey's Twitch. He also uploads it to his channel as well. Um, and I kind of did that because I wanted to give to the community, and I had got a lot of feedback from people saying that I had a lot to offer. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll take your word for it, since those comments, when originally they had hundreds of likes on them. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll make my own channel. TFM and I talked about it. And originally in my channel, I envisioned it to be kind of a gap filler for the things that I wanted to talk about that TFM didn't have the time to address. And it just ended up growing into its own. So now here I am. I've got almost 12,000 subscribers. By YouTube terms, that's still tiny. But for a MGTOW channel, it's pretty reasonable. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of my background and what I do and kind of how I got to where I am right now.
Awesome, awesome. So if you could summarize the MGTOW movement in 40 words or less, what? Because I know you touch on it a lot, but for those people that on my channel that have never heard of it, how would you describe it?
Um, the men going their own way philosophy. It's not really when people talk about a movement or they talk about an ideology. An ideology is a political belief. MGTOW, by its very nature, is not political. It's a lifestyle and it's a philosophy. It's an individual philosophy, and so it's the idea that men, when you go your own way, you avoid marriage. Um, Many times you avoid commitment, and you definitely avoid cohabitation. And the reason that a lot of men will avoid that cohabitation is because they don't want to get locked into a common law marriage and then eventually get divorce raped. I guess you could say that the quick moniker for MGTOW is that the best way to avoid divorce is to avoid marriage.
So as a result, you also avoid relationships.
Many of us do. There are MGTOW monks out there who they avoid women completely, not just in relationships, but they avoid them in every chance they get. Um, I was monk for quite some time, and I mean, I've casually dated, but I don't go searching for it. I don't. A lot of guys, I mean, in traditional Western culture, is a man grows up, he turns 18, he's supposed to go out and get himself a job or get himself a trade, Then he's supposed to get his house and his car, eventually a wife, 2.5 kids, a dog, and 2 week vacations and that kind of thing. And so that was kind of the former male identity. But today, men don't need to define themselves that way. And I think men are discovering they have a lot more freedom to do what they want because there's no pressure to create a family anymore. I mean, we have a lot of people in this world, and a lot of men have sacrificed their entire lives for a woman that just doesn't really give a shit about them. And so men are starting to realize, hey, I can do this for myself. I can go do my own thing. And you know what? I'm saving money. I don't have any stress. I don't have to worry about false allegations. And I don't have to worry about all the problems that come with the modern relationship.
Okay. What is it you think that women want?
Um, I don't know. And honestly, it's not something that I concern myself about because you see, a lot of times when people talk about MGTOW, they frame it as um, the male female dichotomy. In other words, it's like when people talk about feminism, they talk about feminism, they're like, well, you oppose feminism, so therefore you must hate women, right? Which is completely incorrect. It's a way that feminists reframe the conversation so that they can have the conversation they want rather than the conversation that needs to happen. Because if feminists can reframe the conversation to any opposition to feminism is a hatred of women, now they can go, well, you're a woman hater, so therefore I don't have to pay attention to you because you're sexist. Well, it's the same thing with MGTOW. When you talk about relationships and what do women want, um, a lot of women, I think, value security. I think a lot of women, don't necessarily want to be alone. They want to have a man in their life who's loyal and committed and considerate of them, and they want to be treated with, respect and dignity, of course, at the most general level. However, for MGTOW men, it's not what women want that's the issue. It's what are they willing to give in return. You see, feminism has created a world where women can work, women can get education, women have a variety of scholarships and financial opportunities to go to college and trade school just because they have a vagina. And I know that sounds a little bit crude, but that's really kind of where it's at. So women have all these opportunities, yet women still seem to act as though now that they are legally equal to men, which they have been since 1963, um, they still want to be, they want a chivalrous man who's going to hold the door for them. They want a man who's going to pay for dinner. They want a man to do all these different things for them. But what they don't want is a man to bring himself and his relationship to the table. And I say this as a general term. I'm not saying every individual woman is like this, but the question, I guess I can kind of explain this in an analogy if this makes sense. And I know I'm kind of reframing the answer, and I apologize for being verbose, but the question is not, it shouldn't be, what do I think women want? The question should be, why should I invest in a woman in this day and age, in the current year, 2018? You see, because if a woman only brings her sexuality to the table, that's not enough. With the advent of dating apps, with the club, with women talking to men everywhere, sex is at an all-time low. You can get sex from anywhere. I mean, unless you're a complete incel or you're a true forced loneliness guy, you can get laid. I mean, you don't even have to be the most attractive guy in the room or the most fit guy in the room or anything else. And I'm not talking about pickup artistry or game or anything like that. I'm just saying that, men and women are sexual creatures. So the sex comes free of charge. You don't even have to take her out to dinner if she's into you. So, with that out of the way, once you take sex off the table, what do the majority of women offer men other than childbirth and child rearing? The reason I ask that question is because, and it's rhetorical. The reason I ask that question is because when a woman divorces a man, 85% of the time she will gain custody of the kids, even if she doesn't deserve it. Child support is not based on a realistic expectation of the man's income, in that no matter what his income is, they're taking a third of it. And they don't and that's where it starts. I've seen some men have their child support be higher than their paycheck. And that's not a rarity. So at the end of the day, it's not the dichotomy between what do I think women want. It's what do they bring to the table? Because many of the MGTOW men that I know, they own their own business. They're financially successful. Many of them have over $100,000 in the bank. You know, these are men who are highly successful in their fields. And even the men who are divorced and got divorce raped, right? The guys that are downtrodden, they were successful in their marriage, in their professions, in their social lives, in their personal life. But when their marriage broke down, it destroyed every element of their life. And these are men that were not normally considered abusive or drug addicted or alcohol addicted. These were just good men. Now, I'm not blaming women for anything, but I do believe that women have been indoctrinated into an ideology that has set a false set of expectations for them, if that makes sense. And I'll shut up now. I'm ranting.
No, you're fine. Okay, next question. This is a question that one of my viewers wanted me to ask. Don't you think that having the option to go your own way and turn your way back on social norms with ease is a fundamental part of what being a man is anyway? Are you not, in fact, proving the opposite of what your goal is?
Well, all right. So a lot of people talk about going your own way as what are you walking away from, right? So walking away from marriage, walking away from cohabitation, and potentially walking away from commitment. Now, I will say this: I do know some MGTOW, especially some fundamental voices in the community. They have committed relationships. They're in committed relationships, but they don't live with that woman, and they do what they can to avoid common law marriage. So just I want to put that out there. Um, but when it comes to turning your back on social norms, here's the thing: marriage is not the social norm anymore. It hasn't been since second wave feminism came to power in the late 60s. You know, prior to the rise of second wave feminism in 1960, 72% of all adults were married. Today, and this is the United States, today in the United States, that number is 55%. And I've seen stats that show that after 5 years, 84% of married couples, and these are newer marriages, of course, 84% of those married couples are separated or they're living apart. So the social norm is the self-destruction of the relationship. And I say repeatedly on my channel that feminism is responsible for destroying the social contract between men and women. I think that's a bad thing. Um, and I think that when you're talking about going your own way, you talk about a lot of people focus on when they talk about MGTOW, they focus on the idea of what are you walking away from. But that's only half the conversation. The other half of that conversation is where are you going? What are you doing? What are you walking to? What is the purpose in your life? And that's just as important because even for men who haven't been divorce raped, if you have no direction and you're rudderless, you're gonna get depressed, you're gonna get upset, you're gonna be insecure, and you're gonna create more problems for yourself than you're gonna solve. So a lot of men, because of these expectations that society previously put on them, and the fact that many men today are being raised or have been raised in broken homes. In other words, homes created by feminism's war on marriage, or they have whatever. Maybe the father died. They don't have fathers or mentors around them to teach them that you know what, you can go do what you want. If you want to go get that college degree, go get it. If you want to go to trade school, go to trade school. If you want to invent something, go invent it. You have this freedom to do whatever you want to do. If you're upset about your physical fitness, there are a variety of tools out there to help you do it. But just to give you an example of how bad the lack of male mentorship is, if you go to womenshealth.gov, you will find a plethora of health information for women, from breast cancer, from everything else. And this is sponsored by the United States government. However, if you go to menshealth.gov, that website doesn't exist. The government doesn't give a shit about men. They don't, and that's kind of how society has been, because men don't have pity for other men. We have a dominance instinct, and so men are told tough it up. Men are told just go do what you got to do. So for us, and for those people, whether you're consider yourself MGTOW or whether you're living a MGTOW lifestyle, but you haven't discovered the acronym yet. It's one of those scenarios where, what is it you're living for? What are the things you're doing in your life to make your life better? And a lot of men can answer that. And I say the non-stated MGTOW community because I would say, and this is just my own estimation, I would say probably the stated MGTOW community is probably about 150,000 people across the world. And I would say the unstated MGTOW community is probably in the tens of millions. And these are guys who are living as MGTOW. They just haven't heard of the acronym, but they're still going their own way, and they're going their own way in their own way. So I don't believe that educating people about this option, if you're a man, is the opposite of the goal. It's just providing the knowledge, and then whatever a man chooses to do with it is his own opinion. I mean, we're not like the Jehovah's Witnesses where we're going door to door and we're knocking on people's door and going, "Hey, have you self-destructed your marriage today? Do you want to?" We're not doing that. We, at the end of the day, we don't have marches, we don't have protests. We're not trying to change any laws as in the name of MGTOW per se. And we're definitely not trying to go out of our way to judge other men or their decisions in life, unless, of course, they're a super cuck or they're a mangina. Then we'll make fun of them. But that's usually about as far as it goes.
So what's the end game?
There isn't one. The end game is self-preservation, one man at a time. There is no overarching goal for MGTOW men, because the reality is that feminism has turned society into stage 4 cancer, and in my opinion, it's unrecoverable. And every society that has adopted, and every community that has adopted feminism, you see the marriage rate drop, you see birth rate drop, and you see it descend into societal chaos. And the primary example I use, I'm actually in the process of scripting a video about this right now, is Sweden. Sweden has a feminist government. They've been a feminist government for a few years. Sweden is also the rape capital of Europe. They have no-go zones where their police can't even go. The gangs that are there, they're raping women at will. And in fact, I'm included it in my video. There was a story of a woman. She was 12. She was a girl. She was raped. She identified her rapist, and the police never even questioned this man for over 6 weeks, even though she knew who he was exactly. There was another case of a woman who was gang raped. She knew who her rapists were. Her rapists were identified by forensic evidence, and it took the police a year to arrest them. So
why is that?
Because they don't have the resources, because they've allocated the resources incorrectly, and because instead of promoting a society that relies upon merit and a society that relies on your own hard work to make things better, Sweden is created on a welfare state, and they say so on their website. So this idea that basically feminism has created stage 4 cancer for society, that's a common belief shared among many MGTOW people. So for us, it's how do you live your life the way it is right now while avoiding relationships at the same time? Because again, the easiest way to avoid divorce is to avoid marriage.
So if the idea is self-preservation, then, and I hear you keep saying that the birth rate numbers are dropping, are MGTOWs having children with these women but not being in committed relationships? Like, I'm confused.
I have not heard a single
and
MGTOW person who has gone out of his way to have children with anyone.
But then it sounds like you're blaming the feminist movement for not having babies, but don't you think you're contributing to it as well?
No, I think that the idea of not having babies is it's not worth it. I mean, men have, like, I think it's between 6 to 8 times the sex drive of the average woman. However, when men are walking away because they're just like, and men are thirsty, a lot of men are thirsty. And when men are walking away from the relationship, you know that there's got to be some kind of problem. The reason the birth rate is dropping is because, feminism has promoted this promiscuity culture, and they've destroyed the family, and they've said, look, you can have sex without consequence. So if you have sex with somebody and you get pregnant, go ahead and abort the child. I saw numbers from CNN, and I forget the other organization. I'm working on a video for that right now. But there's 55 million abortions every year. across the globe. That is more abortions per year than the entire number of military deaths in World War II over a 6-year period, which is by many is considered one of the most bloodiest wars the world has ever seen. Now, here's the thing. I don't oppose abortion in all circumstances, but I think that elective abortion is is irresponsible, and I think that if people are choosing elective abortion, then I think they need to pay for it for themselves. I don't think they need to put it on anybody else. So I have kind of a complicated view of abortion per se, and I don't want to shift this to an abortion conversation, but because men will not contribute to the problem, men who are going their own way specifically will not contribute to the problem. But men aren't making it any worse. We're just avoiding the relationships. And we're like, look, you know what? I'll tell you what, ladies, you feminist women out there that are doing your thing, enjoy your dildos and cats. We're going to go do something else. And that's in some, and I know it sounds crass, but in some, that is the view of the majority of MGTOW men. They're like, look, if I can't have a relationship with you, I can't be treated with respect and dignity, and you're constantly harassing me because you have a false set of expectations, then I don't have time for you. I got other things I can be doing. And that's kind of where a lot of the MGTOW men are at, myself included.
Okay. It's something that that doesn't sit right with me is the fact that there is really no end game. It's kind of like I'm going to stay here in my I'm going to stay here in my space, and I'm not going to move until you do something about it. But so I think that what I guess it's about personal accountability and responsibility that I'm not understanding the purpose, the why, other than avoiding other than guarding your heart, because I think that's very important. Guarding your heart is very
Well,
important.
and let me interject here. It's not guarding your heart, and I think and I see where you're coming from, but that's a reframe. What it is, it's not just guarding your heart. It's guarding your freedom. It's guarding your pocketbook. It's guarding your bank account. It's guarding your assets. It's not just your heart is just a small piece of it. You know, I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, look, if let's say I'm married to, we'll just call her woman A for purposes of conversation, right? So DDJ is married to woman A, and DDJ wants the relationship to work, but woman A, for whatever reason, doesn't. All right. So my feelings don't matter in that case. I don't have any say as to what
If
matters. My feelings don't matter if she's not invested in the relationship, because nothing of what I say and do is going to impact that. Now, as far as the end game is concerned, here's the thing. If men are going their own way and they're going to work and they're getting their college degree and they're just kind of, they're living successful lives for themselves, you know what they're not doing? They're not contributing to the welfare state. And without the welfare state, feminism can't survive, and it will choke on its own bile, because feminism, all they want is free shit. That's all they want. They can't survive on this. Only 12% of women in the United States identify as feminists. Only 12%. So, and here's the other side. You talk about, like, this idea of, MGTOW has no end game. Well, no, they don't, because we're not an organization. But I can tell you what we've learned. We've learned that if you go and you try to fight the worst parts of feminism, you will lose. In the United States, feminism is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Every men's rights group for the last 20 years has been demonized, has been falsely claimed as being things that they're not. And not even just men's rights groups, but groups that advocate for men in general without even disparaging women. They are relabeled and reframed and lied about time and time again. The Southern Poverty Law Center has falsely framed men's rights groups as being hate groups, as an example. So society has already turned its back on men. And insanity, the definition of insanity, is to try the same thing over again and expect a different result. MGTOW men have realized this. They've realized that men's rights have failed. And don't get me wrong, there are many of us who still have men's rights tendencies. But we understand that that ideology and that those protests and events and things, they're not going to help. But you know what helps? Walking away. You see, feminism told women, don't cook, don't clean, don't take care of your man, don't don't do all these things. Live for yourself no matter
No,
what.
false.
Absolutely, it's
False.
true. Absolutely, it's true. They even say that consensual sex in the context of marriage is considered rape. And these are quotes from actual feminists, and you can source me on these things. They are absolutely true. Now, does every feminist say this? No, but the most influential voices within the feminist movement, the foundational women who have created this movement, it's these batshit crazy women who are in power who are saying it, and they're the ones who are influencing the masses that are out there. Now, do I think you think that? Well, of course not. I don't know if you're a feminist or not. It's irrelevant to this conversation. But let's say you were. I still wouldn't necessarily think that about you. And even if I did, you don't have the reach of some of these feminists who are saying this, who also who are on the international stage. So, with that in mind, the idea of MGTOW going, look, men's rights failed. Men's rights failed again. Men's rights failed for a third time. Okay, men's rights isn't working. We need to come up with a new solution. Now these women have already said, I can do all these things and I don't have to do that. And you know what? Dildos got popular through the feminist-led sexual liberation movement. Female sex toys are a multi-billion-dollar industry everywhere. But yet when male sex toys come out, all of a sudden that's misogyny. All of a sudden everybody's screaming and they're up in arms because men have a way to sexually gratify themselves without masturbation or without the involvement of a female. So, and you see this because now sex dolls are coming up. Now there's a huge push within the manosphere where sex dolls are a thing. In fact, when I talked earlier about the social contract between men and women being dead and feminism killed it, they did a survey of men, and 1 in 4 men said they would have sex with a sex doll, a lifeless object. So one of the things that TFM and I talk about, we're like, look, when you get so bad that men are going to have sex with a lifeless sex doll, 1 in 4 men are going to have sex with a lifeless sex doll, something's wrong, because women at the most basic level when it comes to relationships have 2 jobs. One, to be intimate with their man at some point, consensually, of course. And 2, don't be a headache. But we've gotten to a point where many of these women are so indoctrinated through feminism and all its ideology that these women don't understand how to be reasonable, and they never have enough. So at the end of the day, when it comes to this idea of there's no end game, or this idea of we're walking away, we have to just take care of ourselves, because the greater good at this point is the happiness in our lives, because every movement that we've seen that would protect our interests is either been lied about, they've been destroyed, or they've been relegated to not having any kind of credibility, again, because we've tried it. So my question for you is, what is to your mind, if women don't solve the problem, who will? Because men have tried and failed.
So that's funny that you say that, because I was going to say something like that. From what I'm hearing, men just want a more docile, vulnerable, don't say anything, just shut your mouth kind of woman. And I think
Not at
that
all.
the reason
No,
that some
not
of
at all.
these, maybe the reason that some of these men's rights movements haven't worked is because that there is a problem in the world. And I don't
Well,
think that for me, like, because I
right.
follow a lot of feminists on Twitter, and I'm thinking about them right now and the work that they're trying to do in internationally, or even right here in our own home where people are being sex trafficked. I don't think that their main priority is like, oh, like, fuck men, we'll handle this on our own. No, there are plenty of men that are feminists that are saying, hey, there's little girls out there right now that don't have a voice, and I don't want to fight with you about who's cooking dinner. Someone just cooked fucking dinner, you know?
Right, but
And
that's
that's
not.
just
But
my
that's not.
interpretation of it.
Right, right. But that's a
Yeah.
reframe, and let's take this another step further because you touched on something that hits really close to home with me. Okay,
Uh-huh.
I had a horrible divorce fight with my first ex-wife. My young
Uh-huh.
children, my young daughter, and my young son were raped 5 and 6 days a week in the home of their mother. The
Mm-hmm.
courts were told this. The feminist courts were told this. The feminist parenting investigator knew this. The feminist law enforcement investigator from the sexual assault unit from the sheriff's office, they knew this. And you know what they did? They didn't give a shit. They hated me so much as a man that they were happy to put my children in a home of a rapist as long as I didn't have custody of them. And my children's lives were forever changed. So to hear this and no disrespect to you, but to hear this bullshit narrative about how men want a docile woman, or all this trauma about women. Let me tell you what feminists don't do. They don't give a shit about women. The feminist icon is Hillary Clinton. She was the most powerful feminist in the United States.
I
She
don't.
she defended a man whom she knew was a child abuser and laughed about it when she was done. This is documented. You can check this. If you look at the hashtag Me Too movement and you look at the majority of the men who got taken down in the hashtag Me Too movement, you know what they weren't? They weren't good men. They were male feminists. Weinstein, who was probably one of the most prominent perpetrators of sexual assault and sexual harassment, if you believe the stories, right? He was a male feminist. He gave money to the feminist movement. The issue isn't that men were a problem. Give me a second here. The issue isn't that men were a problem. It's that in 1960 the rape rate was 9 per thousand. After the rise of second wave feminism, after the rise of promiscuity culture, after the rise of the sexual liberation movement, that rate jumped over 400% like 10 years later. So at the end of the day, you're right. Look, women shouldn't be trafficked. Children shouldn't be trafficked. All these areas should be able to fight for these things. Nobody's saying that those things aren't real. Nobody's saying that those things aren't real. What men want is not what, and I don't say all men, because there are some men out there that they're pieces of shit. Okay, they do want a docile woman. They do want a woman who's just going to be like, yeah, yeah, honey, no, honey, whatever. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is men want women that aren't cunts. What I'm saying is men want women who will treat them with dignity, who will treat them with respect, and who will invest in them as much as men will invest in women. You see, when I talk to women, I ask them, and I do occasionally, I'll look around and I'll see if there's a woman out there worth committing to. And I ask the question, what do you bring to the table? I mean, other than sex, what do you bring to the table? Do you have a good job? Do you have a career? How are you emotionally?
Excuse me.
Have you ever been diagnosed with a mental health problem? Do you have a drug issue or an alcohol issue? And most of these women, they have these things. And again, I'm not blaming women, and I know you keep reframing this as blaming women. I don't believe that quote unquote all women are the problem. I believe that there are many women out there who don't really know. Let me give you some stats real quick, just to give you an idea. The majority of homeless in the United States are men. Okay, more men are victims of domestic violence in the United States than women. And they've done stats on Harvard has done a stat on this. When it comes to non-reciprocal domestic violence, in other words, domestic violence where one party assaults the other, 70% of the time the perpetrator is female. Further, when the Duluth model was created, and I did a video about this. It's Duluth, and it's called Duluth and the feminist indoctrination, or the ideological indoctrination of society, where the founder, I quote the founder of the Duluth model for the domestic violence intervention program, and she said basically, and her quotes was, "We lied about our stats. We created this based on a lie, and when we couldn't cover up the lie, we pretended it didn't exist." It's a 15-minute video. I encourage everybody to watch it because I cite from the textbook. There's a publicly published college textbook where she writes the entirety of chapter 2, and I pull quotes out of it, and they're damning. Now, again, I want to make sure something's abundantly clear. I, as a father who's had my daughter raped, I know that this is a real issue. I understand it is a real issue. But what I'm saying is that the feminists who are in power don't give a shit. They just don't. And they demonize men at every step of the way. Now, are they actively doing it today? No, because feminism won. There's no fight to have in the United States. So now they're off fucking up everybody else's countries. And the sad part about it is if you look at the feminist movement both in the United States and internationally, the one threat to women's rights in anywhere in the world, do you know what that threat is? It's Sharia law. Sharia law says that a woman's testimony is worth less than a man's. It comes from the assumption that every sexual assault allegation from a woman is false, and because women are just liars. Now, there are many people in the MGTOW movement who agree that this is the case, but not everybody. And I'm not saying that, that this is the case or this isn't the case, but Sharia law discriminates against women by design. Yet prominent feminists within the United States and within Europe go out of their way to defend these people. Specifically in Sweden, you had people who came from Sharia law enforced countries to Sweden as refugees. They weren't refugees, they were terrorists. They went back to their countries once they got refugee status in Sweden, and they went to go continue to be terrorists. When they returned to Sweden, Sweden helped them change their identity so people wouldn't find out they were terrorists. And now, I'm not saying everybody's a terrorist, and just like I'm not saying every woman is bad, but if you put 10 women in a line, and 2 of them are horrible narcissists who hate men and they just want to abuse men, whatever, and then you have 2 women who are, could be the most perfect wives and the most perfect companion, the most perfect equal partner in a lifelong relationship. And then you have another 6 women in the center who may be varying degrees of that spectrum. No one can tell who those women are. I waited 5 years for my second wife to marry her because I wanted to make sure she was well vetted before I did. We went 21 years before she self-destructed the relationship. And it was because of infidelity. So I didn't want the divorce. But when it came time to have the divorce, I knew it was the right decision to move forward. This isn't about anybody wanting to treat women like slaves. It's not about silencing women's voices. And anybody who says that is either A, ignorant, or B, they're malicious. The idea here is that we haven't solved the problems in our own country. Let me give you another example. When I talked about the stats before about male homelessness, the other stat that I wanted to bring up was that men have no paternity rights by design. So if a woman gets pregnant, a woman can choose to abort the child. She could choose to keep the child. She could choose to adopt the child. She could choose to go to a hospital or go to a church and drop the baby off and leave sight unseen. She can choose to do all those things, and that's fine. A man can't. If a woman sperm jacks a man, which happens far more often than people think, and sperm jacking isn't just stealing of sperm, it's women telling men, I'm on the pill, or I'm on birth control, or I can't have kids, or whatever she does to coerce this man into having unprotected sex with her. He has none of those rights. They say man up. Men have one reliable source of birth control. It's the condom. The second reliable source of birth control they have is what's called Vasogel. But nobody will fund it and bring it to market because it allows a man to control his own reproductive rights. It's a little switch, and it goes into the vas deferens or near it, and you can switch on or off the sperm so that you're not actually accidentally impregnating a woman. So the only other option for men other than the condom at this day and age in this state is getting a vasectomy. So at the end of the day, men don't have paternity rights or reproductive rights. If a man doesn't sign up for the draft, he's not allowed to vote, he's not allowed to get financial aid, and he's not allowed to have a federal job. Women don't have any of those things. They have the privilege of voting. It's not a right because there's no responsibilities there, but they have the privilege of voting, but they don't have to sign up for the draft. They still get financial aid, and they can still work in federal jobs. Those are just the things off the top of my head as far as how men's and women's rights are there. The reality is, at the end of the day, in the United States, women have more rights and privileges than men do, just on a baseline scale. And I know that a lot of people talk about the wage gap, but wage equality was signed in 1963. If women are concerned about not getting paid as much as men, they've had legal recourse on the law books again for 50 years. They can go to the EEOC and they can file a complaint. They can file a civil suit in court. They can go to their local attorney generals and do this, and they've had this right forever. What pisses me off about feminists is that feminists refuse to educate these women on this. And to kind of tangent a little bit more on that, I have a guy who follows me, he's a college student in California, and he got a trifold brochure about sexual assault, like what to do if you're sexually assaulted, date rape, roofied, whatever kind of sexual assault it is. It's a trifold. It's probably 1,000 or 1,500 words, and it talks about all the resources a woman can go to report and to deal with sexual assault. But you know the one that was missing? Can you think of the one thing that they didn't tell women to do?
What?
Call the police. That is the one solution for sexual assault. You want to solve sexual assault today? The first step is you have to call the police. You have to file a police report. Then you get your feminist organizations to push for that police report to do something about it. Because once a man is arrested, if he's been arrested of sexual assault, he's more likely to be convicted than not in the United States. But the problem is that you have so many of these women out there who are being told to go do everything other than what the only right thing to do is. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the only thing that they should do is file the police report. Obviously, they need counseling.
No,
Obviously,
yeah,
they
of
need
course. But
support.
can I,
Yeah, go for it.
real quick, as the one who just recently was sexually assaulted,
Sure.
I was terrified to go to the police.
Sure.
And I went to this one, and I forgive me, I really
No,
want
that's
to
fine.
say the website out loud, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But the very first thing they did was calm me down, and the thought was, you have to do a police report.
Right.
So they're not. I understand what you mean in the pamphlet, but their protocol is to say you have to file a police report. And I did, and nothing's happened. He hasn't been arrested, which,
Right.
whatever, womp womp, whatever happens. I mean, it shouldn't happen, but it happened, and I just wanted to touch base on that.
Right. And
Also,
I think
I know that
that's
you said you
important.
didn't want this.
The other thing that I would say too is that if you had, and obviously it may be a little late now, but I would also say that women who've been sexually assaulted should also do a rape kit. So sorry about that. I just want to
Um,
interject that. I
no,
apologize.
no, no, no. I know that you said we didn't want to do this over 45 minutes.
Yeah,
I think we started a little late though anyway.
we did.
I just wanted to say that one more question, and then I think you had some questions for me. You said there were women that were a part of MGTOW. So they what are they? I mean, I know you can't speak for all of them, but what
Sure.
do you find with the main consensus is why they're a part of it?
Well, when I say women are part of MGTOW, there are women who follow MGTOW content creators, and there are women who communicate um, with guys who are MGTOW, and I mean, some of these women are friends of MGTOW guys. Um, what I find the main consensus is they're just as frustrated with feminism and with the destruction of the social contract as men are. And it's one of those scenarios where they're like, okay, well, maybe at one time, maybe feminism was needed, but in the United States, at least, and most of the Western world, it's no longer needed. And so they're trying to figure out, many of these women are being ghosted. I mean, guys now have gotten to the point where they're like, well, shit, sex is free. So these guys are going out, they're having sex with women, and they're just disappearing on them. And women are like, what the hell's going on? I'm a single woman, I'm successful, I'm in my 20s or I'm in my 30s, and I'm a good woman. Why can't I find a guy who will commit to me? And so they find the MGTOW movement. They're like, oh, now I get it. And a lot of women will disagree with some of the decisions that MGTOW men will make, or do make, but they understand where men are coming from. So just like, for example, you and I are going to disagree on some things, and we've disagreed on some things in this particular stream, but that doesn't mean that I should hate you or you should hate me. It's
Yeah.
just it's a civil disagreement, and that's okay
Yeah.
because we're not the same person, and again, our experiences are different, and so my frustration, or I should say, when it comes to women who associate with MGTOW men, many of them realize that these are the men whom they are looking for relationships. I know multiple content creators who have had women fall in love with them, who've had women, attempt to have relationships with them, and it's not uncommon. And again, it's not a celebrity status or anything like that because MGTOW channels are tiny. It's just that they understand that they can talk to these men and they won't be sexualized, they won't be harassed unless it's in a joking fashion and it's very clear that it's a joke. But many of the MGTOW men are more approachable and more reasonable than a lot of the other men that are out there. And so, like, MGTOW men aren't white knights. They don't have any sexual expectations of these women, so these women feel safer to associate with them. It's kind of like how women were attracted to homosexual men. They called them fag hags because the homosexual men, even though they would flirt with these women, they were homosexual, so they were interested in men. So women felt safe around homosexual men. It's kind of the same way now with women who associate with the MGTOW community. They're like, well, these guys aren't really looking for anything, so we can have these conversations. What's interesting, though, is that many of these women are traditionally conservative women who, again, want families. They want to be able to have these long-term relationships, and they're trying to figure out what the hell happened and where have all the men gone.
Okay. Um, cool.
Yeah, so
I, I have some final thoughts, but I want to save it to for the end. Did you have any questions for me? I'm sure you probably didn't.
well, I don't have any questions for you, but I will say this, whether it's you or somebody else, obviously filing a police report is important. Preserving the forensic evidence is important. And because that's really where this starts, it starts with if there's domestic violence or sexual assault and these people are actually victims, then yeah, file the police report, follow up with the police officer, find out what's being done, get a case number, not an incident number, get a case number. Because I'll tell you, you said you were afraid to call the police. I know people who've been physically assaulted, not sexually assaulted, but physically assaulted. They're afraid too.
Yeah,
Every victim of a crime is afraid. And the point I
yeah,
was trying to make, wasn't to dismiss your concerns. It was that the majority of feminists out there don't say go to the police first. And the majority of the feminist organizations out there, if they really wanted to be effective, they would push for criminal convictions. They would push for police investigations. They would push for, instead of doing their own parallel investigations or their witch hunts, they should let the law enforcement do it because they are the ones who have training. And there's a story I kind of want to tell. And again, I know we're going a little bit above our time frame, but I think it's an important story to tell because if feminists did this or did something like this story I'm going to tell, they would be far more effective and there'd be far less witch hunts and innocent men going to prison for crimes they didn't commit, as well as far less sexual assault victims. There was a woman that I knew in Washington State, and she had a son, and her son was playing in the park one day. This adult man, the kid was 10 or 11. This man caught her son, drug him into the bushes, violently raped this young boy, and then castrated him and generally mutilated him. And she started a group called the Tennis Shoe Brigade. They had no leaders. It wasn't like, they had a couple meetings here and there, but all they did was they had a little pin with a tennis shoe on it. And then every time there'd be a court case that would show up with one of these sexual, like these child abuse, because they focus on child abuse victims. They would show up to the criminal case and they would drop a tennis shoe in the middle of the courtroom and leave. And they'd sit quietly, or they'd sit quietly, and you'd have a full courtroom where this pedophile has 4 dozen eyes on him, right? And all they did was sit there. They didn't protest. They didn't have signs. They didn't, all they did was show up and they'd drop a tennis shoe off, and there'd be 50, 60 single tennis shoes sitting in the middle of the court case during this guy's arraignment or during the guy's trial. And what's the judge going to do? Nobody's causing a fuss, but everybody's eyes are on him. And now everybody understands this is a problem. And when people, it got to the point where the tennis shoe brigade actually changed some laws. And so you see this, and they had a huge impact on child abuse cases. Legitimate pedophiles got put behind bars more often than they did before. If we really want to focus on issues, great, let's focus on the issues. But the problem that I see with feminism is that it is advocated for women's rights at the expense of men. That's not equality. So, and I think that's the thing where people are headed to, because now we're at a stage where, the social contract between men and women it's dead, and good women and good men can't have relationships anymore because of all the drama that's out there that's associated with it. And I think the final thing that I would like to leave you on is that to say that this is just a relationship issue or men are protecting their hearts, that's important. And it's a legitimate point you make. But that's not all of it. It's about the false allegations of domestic violence. It's about the false allegations of DV, or I should say of rape and sexual assault. It's about getting divorce raped. It's about having your life destroyed and being falsely put behind bars. And I want to make sure that something also is abundantly clear. I'm not saying that legitimate sexual assault victims like you or my daughter don't exist. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that false allegations make it harder for women like you to get justice. That is the number one reason why this is a problem. It's because there's been so much misinformation given that nobody gives a shit anymore. And women like you and women like my oldest daughter, they're the ones who suffer for it. Because I'll tell you what, your sexual assault didn't just affect you. It affected everybody close to you. It affected everybody around you. And it will impact any relationship that you have with a man going forward, because it'll always be in the back of your mind. You'll carry it with you at some level. So nobody's saying that those things aren't real. And I think that's kind of the takeaway that I would like to leave you with. And I do appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
No, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Really. My final thought before we wrap this up. I'm really glad that I reached out to you, because I learned something new today. I always try to learn something new, and even when something makes me feel uneasy, I try to lean into it, and I'm always trying to educate myself. And if I could just leave, I really hope that I don't get any like negative, angry comments. But if I could just leave something for your
Sure.
viewers as well as mine, is that we need to stop worshiping false idols. Let's stop saying that Hillary Clinton's the idol for feminists. Let's stop doing that. I think that celebrities are great. I mean, like, I love me some like Beyonce, but like that doesn't mean I'm going to live Beyonce's lifestyle. Let's live our own individual lifestyle. Let's practice what we preach. And if we see a problem, it's like if I work in the restaurant business, so like it's like see it, say it. If you see a problem, say it, but also try to do something actively about it. It may not be on a grand scale, but like just in your hometown. I'm trying to oh my God, this is weird. I'm saying this out loud. I'm going to put on a play in the fall. You're the first person I've told about this.
Okay.
Surprise, mom. And the subject matter is going to be bringing awareness to mental health. And I'm really scared and I'm really nervous about it. But this is a conversation that needs to happen in my hometown. So start small, everyone. We can talk about it all day. Yeah, the world fucking sucks. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. But guess what? We have a voice and we can do something about it. And I love that we did this because we're talking about it. So.
Right. All right. Well, thank you. And everybody who watches the video, thank you for watching. There will be links to Ashley's YouTube channel and her social media profiles. So if you want to follow Ashley or check her channel out, those things will be available. And then I'm assuming that once she mirrors it's on her channel, there'll be a link, hopefully, to my channel as well. With that, I hope everybody has a great day and take care.